Hello, everyone. Thank you, Jenny, and thank you, The Good Wine Shop. Normally, I will be in the shop this time of the year. You might have met me if you're a regular to the Grower Champagne month. We've been with Eric Rodez a couple of times, once in Chiswick, I believe, and once in Kew. But living in the years 2020, 2021, when they approached me to represent our grower Champagne and to do something on Frederic Savart, of course, I said I would be delighted to participate, and I'll try to impersonate Frederic as much as possible. I do have the same French accent, so that's one very positive sign. And I will try to pronounce his cuvée and his Savart, as we say, as close as possible to his philosophy. So myself, I'm working for a company called Wine Source, and we do import and distribute some grower champagnes in the UK, so including Frederic Savart. But also you probably have seen on the Good Wine Shop shelf Champagne Grelais. So Adrien is also a very small winemaker and very young, very talented. He's based in the Côte des Blancs. And we also have Eric Rodez, which I just mentioned earlier on, also widely presented with the Good Wine Shop. So today you should have in your glass, like me, still chilling. So this is the cuvée Ouverture from Frederic Savart. So a little bit, what I will do, I will share a few pictures or maps on the screen so we can virtually travel to Champagne for a moment. Great. So Champagne is quite a very vast and very varied region. So in terms of cities, I'm not so sure that you will actually see my arrow, but if we go from the top of the screen or from the northern side, you will have in red something which is called Vallée de la Velle, but also it's known as Massif de Saint-Thierry. So here you will have mostly Premier Cru. In green, this is the area that we are going to focus on tonight, which is the Montagne de Reims. So the city called, so spelled R-I-M-S. British people will say Reims. We pronounce Reims in France. Then you will have something a little, the Vallée de la Marne, which is a little bit like a pale pink. And this is following the river Marne. This area has a few Premier Cru, and a couple of Grand Cru. And this region is very famous for the Pinot Meunier grape. Just south of this, you will have in kind of pine green, the Côte des Blancs. And this is mainly Grand Cru villages, and the vast majority of the plantings will be Chardonnay. South of this, you will have another region in purple, which is called the Cézanne. And here you will have, it's a mixed type of soils, but it's the logic continuity of the Côte des Blancs. Then you will have a break of about probably 150 to 200 kilometers, and you will arrive in the Aube area. You're actually very close to Burgundy and very close to Chablis. So the soils are completely different, and there will be more limestone, and will produce wine with a different identity. So that will be also an area where there is a rosé, super famous rosé called Rosé des Rissés. But I will try to now stop sharing my screen, and I will try to upload the next where the next map, and for this map I want to take you to the Montagne de Reims. If you bear with me 2 seconds. Here we are. So this is the area of interest for tonight. So the Montagne de Reims lies just, I will say, east and south of the city of Reims itself. The city is very, very famous, and was, before Paris, was where the kings of France were crowned. So there is a very, very famous cathedral, and was one of the most prominent city in France in the Middle Ages. You will have directly south of the city itself, you will have it kind of make like a crescent, and you will have most of the Grand Cru villages like Bouzy, Ambonnay, you will have Verzy, Verzenay, Mailly, all of those will be Grand Cru vineyard, and they will be synonym almost with Pinot Noir grape variety. But Pinot Noir is the main grape variety for the entire region. So if you look just on the left-hand side of the city, this is actually a little bit like a cigar-shaped type of sub-region, which is called La Petite Montagne de Reims. And you will find on the south of it, you will have a village called Écueil, E-C-U-E-I-L, and this is where Frederic is based. So Frederic is the third generation wine grower. His grandfather planted the vineyard in 1946, and he passed down the vineyards to his son Daniel, who then after trained Frederic and passed the reins in 2005. Frederic was not, at the beginning, was not interested at all to make champagne. And funny enough, he was training to be a footballer. And he had entered some very famous football academy and sports club. But following a sports injury, he came back to his domain. Also, at the same time, he joked very easily that he met a very cute waitress in a restaurant, and that helped him to decide to settle down and go back to the winery. So the cute waitress became his wife, and they have 2 daughters together nowadays. But he came back to the domain from being a teetotal, so he wasn't drinking any champagne at all or any wine of any kind, and had absolutely zero knowledge about wine in general, and also just about winemaking. He was helping his father a little bit in the vineyard now and then, but that was pretty much it. So he really took the bull by the horns, as we can say, and his father showed him the rope. The estate is not really big in terms of surface, so they're farming only 4 hectares of vineyards, which in Champagne is really, really small. For example, the other 2 wine growers that we mentioned earlier on, Eric Rodez will have 5.5 hectares of vines, and Adrien Dont also 5.5. So for those kinds of maker, they're a little bit like a drop in the ocean compared to bigger houses like Moët et Chandon or Veuve Clicquot. But what the Grand Marques are doing in terms of marketing, they are making the name Champagne almost like a brand, and they're very useful to help on the marketing side for those growers to be recognized all around the world just by using the name Champagne. Frederic Savart has 3 hectares solely on the village of Écueil, and he has 1 hectare. If you manage to locate Écueil, if you look just on the left-hand side, you will see another village which is called Villers-aux-Neux, and this is also a very prominent village in that region. There is one very specific site called Le Mont-Benoît, which is really famous for champagne geeks and champagne aficionados. Le Mont-Benoît is produced as a standalone vineyard by Frederic Savart, but also one of his very good mates, Emmanuel Brochet. So Frédéric will use 1 hectare of Le Mont-Benoît and produce half of it under the Mont-Benoît label, and the other half, which are the bottom part of the slope, will be used in another of his cuvées quite emblematic called Accompli. So going to taste Ouverture. So Ouverture will be based from vineyards around Écueil. So 4 hectares of vineyards, they're scattered around the village. It will have 50 different plots, and those 50 different parcels will have been planted either by his grandfather, and they've been pretty much planted by hand. So the space between each vines can be very narrow, so it's very difficult for him to go with a tractor or any type of machinery. So this will be a huge labor of love and quite intense work for Frédéric. And because the vines are mainly old vines, the type of work that he will do will be very minimum. In those old vines, he will leave a grass crop, and he will not tend to plow them, just by flattening the grass, and will create normal natural nutrients to the vines. In the vines of his planted by his father, they're depending if they are on the flat land or if they are a little bit more steep, he will use either a tractor or still continuing plowing the vines by hand. So in terms of workforce, he's pretty much himself and now his nephew at the winery, and all the work that he's doing is rather sustainable. He's practicing organic, but is not certified. He wants, in terms, just in case there is like a huge pressure of oidium or mildew, he wants to have the ability to use his knowledge and to make sure that he's not spraying any chemicals, but he will try to tend as much organic as possible. So with 4 hectares of vineyards, at the moment he's producing 70,000 bottles. So it could be a sign of why his champagnes are really, really hard to find and also hard to get. So in Écueil, for the Champagne Ouverture, we are on two different kinds of soil. We are either on rich clay soil, which will bring all the backbone and complexity, and also there is quite a lot of sand in this village, so this will give a little bit more of the finesse. And what the champagne, what Frédéric Champagne are very synonymous will be very expressive, very vivid, and very crystalline. So even though we are here on 100% Pinot Noir, the wines are very bold and very bright, very upfront, but also by the intense labor of love in this vineyard, you will have something very delicate at the same time. I will show you as well. I'm going to share this screen with you. Here you do have all the different type of champagne that Frederic is producing. So we're tasting today the Ouverture. So I called Fred this morning just to make sure that I had all the most up-to-date information, because the way he's set up currently in his winery, the winery is in the city center of his village, and is super tiny, and he starts to be overwhelmed by the demand, the production, and he's doing several disgorgements on the same cuvée every single year. So if we are looking, for example, at the back label, you will have the date of disgorgement written on it. So here you will have, mine is September 2020, and I'm pretty sure all of you, it's this. I took the same batch as I sent to the Good Wine Shop, so we should all be on September 2020. So on this, we are on 3 different base vintages. So the way you produce a champagne, when it doesn't have the vintage on the label, you will have one base vintage. So cheers. So here we are with mainly 2018 as the base vintage, and then it will be followed by 3 other vintage, which are called reserve vintage. So you will have 2017, 2016, and 2015. The way, so 16 and 17 as vintages in Champagne were very difficult vintages, really high in quality, but very low yielding, so very small quantities. And because, so normally Ouverture, you will have 3 different vintage. It's the rule at Champagne Savart, Ouverture, you always have 3 different champagne, 3 different years blended together. But on this specific, because 16 and 17 didn't produce enough, he extended the blend to 4 different vintages. And 2015 and 2018 were rather hot vintages. So that means the champagnes, so the grapes were very ripe at first. So at the moment of harvest, so they're naturally rich. What Frederic decided to do is to reduce the dosage. The dosage is once the wines are fully fermented in bottle. So the wines will have a little bit of a liquor added to it. And this liquor used to be, the addition was about 7 grams of sugar per liter. But being now 15 and 18 vintages and hot vintages naturally rich, he has reduced the dosage to 4 grams nowadays. The way Frederic also vinifies his champagne is very specific and almost down to his own, I will say, recipe. So once he harvests the grapes, first of all, he's looking at an optimal ripeness. Frederic is a huge fan of Burgundy wines, and he's already looking, when he's pressing the juice, and he wants to make great white wine to start with. So he will probably harvest later than most of his comrades in the village. He's looking at around 12 degrees percentage alcohol already when harvesting the grapes. That will ensure him to have really, really profound wines and really, really good material to start with. So having riper wines at the beginning will also mean lesser dosage at the end. So here, 100% Pinot Noir, but what he also makes a huge difference is that everything is vinified in barrels. The barrels, because he wants to make his wine to capture a place and a time, sorry, I'm disturbed by the saucers from the 1940s. I don't know who's they're amazing. So yes, to make his own barrels, he will source the oak from the local forest, because he wants his champagne to be as true and as close as possible the image of his village. So all vinified in barrel, they will stay on fine lees for 10 months. And he doesn't want to do any filtration nor any collage or nothing whatsoever. It doesn't temper at all with the wines in barrel. He wants to respect, but also leave them be. He will then he won't do any batonnage, like for example you will do in Burgundy with great Chardonnays. Because he doesn't also want to make any malolactic fermentation. So malolactic so there are actually 3 fermentations for the production of champagne. The first one will be the fermentation alcoholic, like any other wines, and that happens just shortly after harvest when you press the grape juice. It's the transformation of the sugar into alcohol. Then after, there is another fermentation that occurs either in during the élevage or maturations, and that is the transformation of the malic acid to the lactic acid. So for a rich style of champagne like Frederic, he wants to keep as much freshness as possible. So the malic acid will have 2 components, and rather than the lactic acid will only have 1. So if you allow that transformation of acid, you will have less acidity. So he wants to keep as much freshness and vivacity in his champagne. Therefore, lot less. So therefore, no malolactic fermentation. So to manage to have no malolactic fermentation, you shouldn't temper the wines in the barrel, and you need to let them live as peacefully as possible, and most of the time on the fine lees. He will then assemble all of his wines and make his cuvée around July time. So in July, he will actually bottle the wines, and he will add a little bit of sugar, and that will start the second fermentation. And the second fermentation occurs in bottle, and he will let them be for 3 years in his cellars. The longer the wines has the second fermentation in bottle, the finer and the more delicate, creamy the bubbles will be. If you taste a champagne and has very big, almost too effervescence, if I may say, it's because the wines will have stayed the bare minimum in the cellars, which is 17 months. Growers like Frederic will tend to age their wines slightly longer in their cellar in order to get very fine, very creamy bubbles, but also to have more complexity, more nuttiness, kind of like croissants, freshly baked croissant, butter, all those kinds of flavors will develop further in the bottle. So the longer you age the champagne in the cellar before disgorgement, the better it is. Another wine from Frédéric that I mentioned is called L'Accompli. So Accompli means accomplished. And this is coming from Premier Cru and Old Vines, and in two different villages. So in Écueil and Villers-Ronneux, it's mainly Pinot Noir, but a tiny portion of Chardonnay. And the parcel that is coming from in Villers-Ronneux is Le Mont-Benoît. And Le Mont-Benoît is co-planted with Pinot Noir and Chardonnay side by side. This will be a more serious style of champagne, even more vinous and even more brassy, I will say. He's also producing a tiny amount of rosé or pink champagne, and that will arrive in the shop. I was talking to the team. We are supposed to be picking up the bottles towards the end of the summer. So if you're looking for something a little bit more special for the Christmas period, the rosé will be back on the shelf. This year, the rosé will be slightly different. Normally, it's a blend of 70 Pinot Noir and 22% Chardonnay. But because the yields on the previous vintages were slightly down, he has decided to only produce his rosé from 2018 vintage, but it won't be showing on the label. And this time, because 2018 is a really powerful vintage, he will use 55% of Chardonnay just to make sure that the champagne keeps to a very high standard, but also has amazing freshness. And the dosage for his rosé will be 3 grams. So we are down to the extra brut style. Then after, you will need also, if you're really, really keen onto Frédéric style of champagne, the jewel in the crown on his production, but it's really, really, really small production. I mean, like a couple of thousand bottles for the entire world at most. This will be Le Mont des Chrétiens. So that is 100% Pinot Noir champagne, which is coming only from that small parcel called Le Mont des Chrétiens in the village of Écueil. So that's a vineyard on clay and limestone, clay and chalk. So topsoil of clay and subsoil of chalk. It's a really specific and really special place, but tiny, tiny, tiny production. Le Mont-Benoît is also, so we were talking about with L'Accompli. This year we will release the 2017 vintage. This is 95% of Pinot Noir and 5% of Chardonnay. And this is highly, highly sought after. It has become a collector's item. And if you have a bottle, or if you manage to find a bottle of Mont-Benoît, most of the people are so eager to try it that they open their bottle a little bit too early. If you manage to find a bottle of Mont-Benoît, my advice will be to wait 2 years, if you can 5 years, but most of the time people will not even wait 2 months. My advice is grab them, at least 2 bottles, one to drink to see what it is, and one to revisit in 5 years' time. He also produced something at even more scarce production, which is called the Expression Rosé. This is always a vintage champagne. And this is coming from the oldest vines from his estate, so from his grandfather. And we are releasing 2017 as well, and that will be in the autumn. So those last 3 wines are really, really specific. And if you can find them, if you find them, my advice will be to buy them, because they tend not to stay on shelves or in stock for a very, very long time. So that's for the core range of Frederic Savart. He has also started something called haute couture. So it's a little bit of like a Christian Dior style of wine. He will buy 4 kilograms of grapes to some of his friends. So in 2016, he managed to buy 4,000 kilograms of Chardonnay from Le Ménil in the Côte des Blancs. So why 4,000 kilograms? 4,000 kilograms in Champagne equals to 1 press. I will stop sharing my screen. So 4,000 kilograms in Champagne equals to 1 press. And 1 press with what the juice you can get from 1 pressing is very, very specific in Champagne. And from that press, you'll be able to only produce a certain amount of bottle. So by creating something which is even more premium and even more scarce availability, so in 1 year, you will probably get 3,600 bottles only of that specific pressing. So Le Ménil is about to arrive in the UK, and so also something very, very specific, because Frederic doesn't produce 100% Chardonnay at all. So this is another one to look forward to. So 2016 was the first vintage. I had the opportunity to try it on barrel at his cellar with the 2017 vintage. And the wines, the way I will describe it is, it's really very burgundy, but it's very refined, very delicate. I'm really think of Chassagne Montrachet Premier Cru with some bubbles. It's really, really amazing, truly unique wine. If you do have any question, do let me know. Frederic is always very generous. If you happen to be visiting Champagne, please let the guys know at the Good Wine Shop. I'm sure we can arrange some visits. So always welcome. Always, we are always keen to promote their work further. If there is anything we can help with, if you have any questions or any special wishes for Frederic's production, I think the Good Wine Shop is one very good place to ask. They always get a nice allocation. If we can accommodate special wishes from you guys, we'll be more than happy to do so. And yes, there is a question if the Clos du Ménil is a specific production from Krug. It's a single vineyard, and it's based in the same village where this Chardonnay is coming from Frederic. So same village, same terroir, which is 100% chalk. So the best terroir for Chardonnay in Champagne.
Claire, Susanna, yeah, no, Susanna is asking if you can describe the champagne.
Yes, of course. Sorry, I was too busy. Oh, something dropped in my glass. So for me, I poured the champagne in a wine glass because I like this style of champagne, which are very vinous. So they need space. They need space to open, and like a Grand Cru or like a great Burgundy, I like to taste this champagne in a big wine glass. So in terms of, I like to describe wines more by how I feel them on the palate, because it's more, for me, it's really it's the emotions that a wine or a champagne will bring you. There is a famous journalist who came to one of our tasting, and when she tried l'ouverture, she said, what I really feel about this wine is that I want to take my clothes off and dance in the room. So I won't do that, but this is the kind of feeling. For me, when you have it on your palate and the wine is already making its mark, it's really expressive. It's not aggressive at all. It's very soft. It's very silky and powerful at the same time. I've got the best sensation, for example, it's like eating a freshly baked croissant and still warm, where you will have toasted hazelnuts, where you will have melted salted butter coming through, and really salted butter, because what I have at the finish of the palate is a huge salinity. And this salinity is coming from the land itself. So that means the vines have very deep roots, and they will get all the nutriment from probably 30 meters down into the soil. So really intense, really powerful, loads of salinity, and you will have this kind of salinity in, for me, it's a sign of a job well made. When I taste wines that are either grown organically, but most of the time biodynamically, after 10 years, I always have salt at the end of the palate. It tastes also like apple crumble. So lots of baked red apple, and really with this kind of oaty, crunchy character that you've got in crumbles. Lots of spices as well, so very soft spices, not hot spices. So more like nutmegs. So nutmegs, a little bit of cinnamon. Everything that you will use almost in pastry. Also for this type of champagne, a very good advice. So from the glassware, bigger glassware, but also the temperature never too cold. So a fridge temperature, I will say around 10 degrees Celsius is the ideal temperature to drink this style of champagne. If you serve them too cold, cold is stopping the flavors to develop. It's only when the wine or when the champagne gets warmer that the flavors and the aromas will exhibit. So if you dig the bottle for 10 minutes in a champagne bucket full of ice, then you will only taste the acidity and you will have very big bubbles, but you won't have the perception on your palate. So if it's too cold in the fridge, if your fridge is too cold, or if you let it a little bit too long in the freezer, for example, accident can happen, or you don't pay enough attention. My advice will be leave it for a little while in the glass. You take one sip, you cheer with your friends, but you let it rest a little bit, and you let it gain. After 5 minutes, it will have gained at least 2 or 3 degrees in the glass naturally. This is for me the best temperature. Is there any other question? Has anyone tried the champagne before, or is very familiar with this grower? I see some yes. Have you tried any other of the cuvées, any of the accompli, or have you been lucky enough to find some Mont Benoit or? For me, l'accompli is best in magnums. So if you find it for Christmas or a special occasion, it's really it's almost like a gift that you give to some people when you open such a bottle. They're really very special. They're so big, they're so loud that I say it's a great champagne to open as a way of making conversation, because you're captivated by what's inside the glass, that you need to talk about it. So if you're bored of talking about the COVID cases rises in the UK, or you want to travel with your friends, just open a bottle of champagne. And from one of those artisan growers, last year we talked a lot about shopping local, finding the great butchery shop, or the great local grocers and so on, the great so like the good wine shop, like really great people who know what they're selling, what they're making. Those kind of people have very small holdings. They work in a very natural, organic way. It's also a choice because they have a message to pass on. We're all aware about climate change. We want to do something different. So supporting those kind of grower, for me, it's a way as well to encourage other champagne growers, but also other vignerons to follow in their footsteps. So drink less, drink better, and I think that's one bit to do for the environment and for the local economy as well.
There is a couple questions in the chat if you want to have a look.
Yes. So do they do magnums? Yes, they do. They do on accompli, so not on the ouverture, sadly, but they will do in ouverture, in accompli, and from time to time. But those are super hard to find with Mont des Chrétiens and Mont Benoit. Rosé, it's only in bottle. Ouverture is only in bottle. So yes, accompli for sure, and from time to time, if you're lucky enough, you can find some Mont Benoit from Mont Chrétien. Food pairing, very good question. I found food and wine matching to be very personal as well, but on this, for me, what it because the champagne is very powerful, I like to go with so loads of mushrooms. So anything with porcini, tagliatelle with porcini, very light sauce, not too creamy, because the cream, the acidity and the cream can be a little bit too much to my taste. So anything as well great with white meat if you're not vegetarian. Do a roast chicken. You can play a little bit with your chicken, even with some lemons. Some kind of Middle Eastern type of cuisine as well. I found it really interesting because they are very powerful, flavorful, not hot spices type of cuisine, but for example, if you look at also Moroccan cuisine, like chicken tagine, if you cook with dates, for example, with figs, you can play a little bit on the sweet and salty type of cuisine. It's it's 8:20, so it's if I speak too much about food and winemaking, I think we're all going to be starving. But anything with cheese as well. If you think of what we say in French as apéro dînatoire, so if you open a bottle of champagne and you give a variety of food, go with salty things. So olives, cheese straws. What can you do with that? Hummus as well with tahini, which has a lot of sesame. Try to look for everything that are either a nutty character. If you think of the wine, try to match as close as possible to the wine. So something with a little bit of acidity, something a little bit with forest floors, mushrooms. The cheese will have this great, especially if it's cooked and toasted. So everything that is, I see Brie, Camembert, Manchego. Manchego, amazing. You know, we were talking about acidity and saltiness. I think Manchego is the king with that. Also, you know, Parmigiano, Parmesan. It's an underrated style of cheese. But if you find a really good Parmesan with at least 3 years of age, you will have. They will start to crystal. The salt will start to crystallize. And that will be absolutely amazing to pair with this style of champagne. And this champagne should be decanted? Really good questions. You can actually. Don't be afraid of losing bubbles, because if you swill your champagne anyway in your glass, you will lose bubbles. So if you pour it into a decanter very gently, it's almost, if you pour it with your decanter almost to the horizontal, this is a great way. What will it will only help to enhance and open the flavor, and especially if the champagne is very young. If you have any other question, it doesn't have to be about Frederic Savart, but any kind of question with grower champagne that I could answer, I'll be very happy to do so.
I've noticed that in the last few years, there seemed to be far more extra brew than I remember seeing when I was younger. It could be I just wasn't allowed to touch these things. Is it a trend now to move beyond brew to the sort of 0 to 6?
Yes.
And why?
I agree with you. There is more and more extra brut. So it's either, I will say a trend will be more, so it kind of started with the Grand Marque, with I think it was Laurent Perrier who did an extra brut, with kind of like a blue label, or it's either called extra brut or dosage zero, so very low dosage. So in terms of the grower champagne, so in Champagne you do have like 4,000 growers. On those 4,000 growers, I will say the vast majority still produce something which will be very close to average cruise booze style of champagne, and you will have only like the tip of the iceberg, which are the Frederic Savart, Eric Rodez, I mentioned Emmanuel Brochet, the Wet and Sorbet, and so on. Those are growers which they are paysans, so they're farmers, so they farm the land, and they will harvest the champagne at optimum ripeness. So they make wine first. Before they make champagne, they make wine, and they are looking at not adding anything to their champagne. So it needs to be of utmost, the most beautiful quality, the fruit, the ripeness, and everything. So great champagne. Then after you will do the second fermentation for the to have a sparkling wine. But if you select everything very carefully from the beginning, you don't have to add any liquor. So hence why you've got so the top makers in Champagne, the top artisans. I will say 90% of them will do extra brut. And also, we were talking about climate change. We had a series, 2009, 2010, in some extent 2012, then 2015, then 2018, super hot vintages. So already there is a natural trend of producing bigger wines, but it's just because of the climate. So if you already have big wines, you won't need to add that much. What you will add, if it's 1 gram or 2 grams or 3 grams, is just to hold the wine together. A little bit like a chef will add salt and pepper to a dish.
Thank you. That's really interesting.
You're welcome.
Given the climate change, then, should I be digging up my garden in Chiswick and growing champagne? As clearly, we will have the right weather quite soon. Yeah, you can start actually. Maybe not digging, but probably cover your house with with vines. It could be a start. But yeah, you're touching a very good subject. I think English wines have come to an age, and just looking at the quality, and it's not just in Kent or Sussex nowadays. So I live in Somerset, and we have more vineyards than before. There is a new wines that is a new sparkling that is going to be launched at the end of the year, produced in Bath. But even up to Yorkshire, you will find vineyards. And also, it's not just for English or local consumption. They're also starting to export quite a bit. So it's, talking about climate change. England is going to take on the world. Spring and frost, yes. So this was very that this was everywhere on the news. So in April, there was loads of frost happening, not just in France, but all over Europe. Actually, I was in Wales 2 days ago, and the guy I was tasting with is helping a local vineyard. And he told me that in April, they had 12 days of frost. So, which for a vineyard is exhausting. So what has happened is that we had a kind of a slight heat wave in March, and the vine started to, so the buds started to explode and to grow. But they're still very tender, and if they encounter frost, they will just grill and you cook and just disappear. So you can have second buds, but the first one will have the vast majority of the grapes in it. In Champagne, they've been impacted, but it's very random. And the main grape variety that was impacted was Chardonnay, because Chardonnay debuds earlier than Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier. So those that were in the Côte des Blancs will suffer most, rather than on the Montagne de Reims. There, like Fred, he only have a tiny percent of Chardonnay. So he said, I had 16 and 17 where I had mildew and oidium. So those are like mushrooms that develop with bad weather conditions. And this also will completely attack the grapes and will dry the grapes even before the grapes can develop
before. So that's like in July, when the grapes are still very, very tiny. So for Fred, he's lucky on that. All the producers around the Montagne de Reims, I think they say a big ouf, we can say in French. So, for example, in France, the areas that were most impacted were the Côte de Beaune, so all the villages, Chassagne, Puligny, Meursault. We have a producer in Meursault. He said, well, forget about harvest this year. They even have hail last week. So I say, if that wasn't enough, you know, it's difficult. It's difficult. So we're helping them in every way we can. So if that means that we're not collecting all the champagne this year, but we will be collecting next year. So that means that instead of paying everything this year, we will split in 2 years, you know, to try for them to have some kind of revenue. It's really, really difficult. Areas that I know have escaped is Alsace, for example. Alsace is kind of like in a valley and is protected by two mountain ranges. So the Vosges on the western side and the Schwarzwald or the Black Forest on the other side. So they're protected quite a lot. I will say the last weather or last phenomenon they had was in 2014. There was a fly actually coming and picking only on red grape berries. So yeah, it's weird. It's a fly that came from Japan and it's called Suzuki fly, and it's a fly that develops in orchards and likes every soft fruit. And in 2014, this fly liked all the weather in Europe and basically affected all the vineyards where they do a lot of fruits as well. So a lot of orchards. So Alsace, a lot in northern Italy, a lot in Germany. So everything that goes from Pinot Gris, Pinot Noir, Gewürztraminer, all grapes that are slightly pinkish to red were completely affected. And this fly pierce the skin and to lay eggs. And so from one day you taste your grape, it's perfectly fine, and you leave it overnight. The eggs have developed and the grape will turn acidic and sour, and you can't produce anything. You just have to bin everything. So only Alsace, and I'm a huge fan of everything that is a Riesling and Alsace, German, Austrian type of wine. Alsace is also a region to look for in terms of quality. Great with food, and still very good value for money. You can find Grand Cru for 30 pounds, including VATs. I wish we could find Grand Cru either in Champagne or in Burgundy for 30 quid. Okay. When will the wine be referred to as Blanc de Noir? Yeah, and this one actually doesn't say it on the label, but it's a Blanc de Noir. So Blanc de Noir, it's a white champagne made from red grape varieties. And you can see if you look at the color, it's very deep, and it almost have it's almost tinted, you know, it's pushing onto the kind of like very golden / old copper, almost with a slight hue of pink. So this is 100% Pinot Noir. And some producer will write blanc de noir on the label or blanc de blanc. So blanc de blanc in Champagne, I will say 99% of the case will be produced by Chardonnay. I say 99% because in Champagne, the three biggest grape varieties are Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Pinot Meunier. But there are also several tiny grape varieties that are still allowed, like Pinot Blanc, for example, if you don't exceed a certain percentage. So you can find some, I'm thinking of a grower Champagne who is, the name is Tarlan, and they produce 1 year a cuvée called BAM, which is B for Blanc, so Pinot Blanc, A for Arban, and M for Méliès. So 3 tiny grape varieties, but it's allowed in Champagne, so they could produce a cuvée. So Blanc de Noir, as a general thinking, will be a blend of Pinot Noir of Pinot Meunier, or can be 100% Pinot Meunier, or can be 100% Pinot Noir. After, it's not compulsory to write it on the label. It's entirely up to the grower to decide what he wants to, how he wants to promote his champagne. And the same with Blanc de Blanc. For example, we do have Eric Rodez. Eric Rodez will produce a Blanc de Blanc and a Blanc de Noir, but also all his cuvées. But here, yeah. So I've got here, I'm going to try to show as much as possible. This is a 2009. It's a rosé, so rosé made from macération, but it produced exactly the same wine as a white wine. And you can see just above his name, Rodez, he puts Pinot Noir on the label. So that means if it was a white wine, that will be a Blanc de Noir. Eric likes to promote more the terroir and the grape variety rather than the style. So on all his single plot vineyards, you will either find Pinot Noir or Chardonnay.
When you're at home, given your expertise and spending your own money, which I'm sure generally you have to, which champagnes do you normally have at home?
So I do have a huge cross with Eric Rodez, and he has set the bar really, really high. I also like the guy. I really like the Mont Benoit from Emmanuel Brochet. I think is an outstanding wine, very good value for money as well for what it's in the bottle. I like Adrien as well. His cuvée dans un premier temps is also very good value for money. The wines of Vouet and Sorbet is really good. What else? There are so many, it's very difficult. But mainly, yeah, there is also a small grower, not too famous, José Liévins, and he's the main winemaker for a brand called Jacques Picard. And this is something, is based in a tiny village called Beru. And he's starting to, so he's moving towards organic farming. I think he's on the last year of being fully organic. It's Premier Cru, so it's not Grand Cru. Really, if you find it in London, buy a bottle. And I mean, value for money is just amazing. What else? I mentioned Tarlan earlier on. They do Cuvée Louis, which is absolutely delicious. I tried the other day Champagne Guibora in the Côte des Blancs, really stunning juice. Yeah, I tend not to have Grande Marque. If I do, I really respect the work of Louis Roederer, for example. and 2 smaller type of houses. I really like Henriot and really like Paul Roger as well. I think they've got an amazing family. Yeah, it's multi-generations as well. It's really good. And we only started recently. I don't have a bottle with me. We started to import the champagne of Roger Coulon. So also in the Montagne de Reims. They're really, really on the far, far north of the Montagne de Reims. And they're Pinot Meunier specialists. So one of them will be the Herri Audier from Roger Coulon. This is something really unique. It's 90% of Pinot Meunier that has 90% Pinot Meunier from the village of Vrigny and surroundings, and 10% of Chardonnay. The Pinot Meunier is so it's coming from a Réserve Perpétuelle. So a Réserve Perpétuelle is like a Solera. So it's something that was started in 1995. So what they do every year, they will take half of the production to bottle, and they will fill up with the new vintage on top. So it's really special. It's really big, especially on the nose. Is way more refined on the palate. It's where I think the magic of the family and their savoir-faire is coming through, and also the addition of Chardonnay is really lifting all the champagne. So have a go, because it's on pour. You can taste more, learn more about grower champagnes. It's available in all the shops on the barrel pour. Yeah, the Roger Coulon will be in Richmond. If it's Richmond at the weekend, then you can go to the park. It's amazing. Bilcar Salmon is very good. Yes, indeed. It was one of my very first crush, actually, Bilcar Salmon with the cuvée François Billecart. Their top wine, I think, is really special, and their top, the Rosé Alexandra as well, is really amazing. I actually have a bottle of the Rosé, simple Rosé at home. Oh, and in 1989, so that means like the old ways, it was even better back then. Really good. But I mean, in terms of champagne, if you shop your champagne at the good wine shop, you're in very good hands. I find those shops really not helpful, because I want to buy everything. So it's a huge dilemma, you know. As a girl, you know, I feel more at ease in a shoe shop, because I know exactly what I want. But if you put me in a good way, in a great shop with a great selection, this is where it hurts my wallet.
Thank you very much. I'm going to heat my supper.
Very good.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, everyone. It was good fun. I hope you learned something. And I truly hope that next year I'm going to see you face to face with a bottle of wine, that we will be able to cheers together at the next Grower Champagne event. It's something to look forward to, and I can't wait to present something new, something old, something exciting.